Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to engage in this very, very important theme. I'm Sir Michael Barber. I'm DFID's Special Representative on Education in Pakistan. And what I want to say about the importance of evidence-based policy making is that the evidence base is important, but so is the policy making. And we need to keep both parts of this in play as we go through the debate. Let me make a handful of introductory points and then talk specifically about what we've been doing in Punjab on education over the last 2 years. So the first point I want to make about the evidence base is it should never be used as an excuse for not acting where action is needed. If you take a country like Pakistan, but it would apply to many other countries, we need to act. The risk of doing nothing, in other words, is very substantially greater than the risk of trying something, even if the evidence base for that is not perfect. So we've got to get on with it. There is a need for bold action in Pakistan, which is why we've embarked on the roadmap and some of the other changes in education in Pakistan. Too often I've heard in Whitehall over the last 15 years the evidence base or the incompleteness of the evidence base being used as an excuse for not acting, for being incremental, but in the circumstances of Pakistan and other places, it's irresponsible not to act when the risks of doing nothing are so great. So I hear people in Whitehall say, couldn't we do some more research? Why don't we try a pilot study? Maybe we should try it out in Scotland first. All these kinds of excuses for not getting on and acting. So that's point one. The second point I want to make is the central question for any policy maker in any education system in the developing world, or the developed world actually, is how do I get every student or every child in this country or province or whatever the jurisdiction is a good education as fast as possible? That's a different question from how do I reform my public system. So if you're a political leader or an administrative leader of an education system, it's not just about the public system, it's about making sure every child gets a good education, regardless of which sector they go to. The third introductory point I want to make is this. Choice is good in itself. It's a positive thing. The default seems to be that every child should go to whichever school we tell them, and choice is a matter of a debate, but the default should be the other way around. Everybody should have choice. Anybody in this policy debate about education, whether in the developed world or the developing world, who says they're against choice is basically saying they're against choice for the poor, because the wealthy have choice anyway. So the question is, are you in favour of choice for everybody, or are you in favour of it only for the wealthy? If you're in favour of it only for the wealthy, be aware of the consequences of that, which is often in the developing world you're saying to the poor parents of a child, we've only got one school in your area, it's not very good, the teacher never shows up, but that's the only place your child can go to school. That to me is completely unacceptable. Moreover, if you look at the evidence over the last 15 years, what you see is that pretty poor parents have voted with their feet. When they get a marginal extra rupee or whatever the local currency is, they choose a low-cost private school, often not because those low-cost private schools are really good, but because they're better than the government school. The teacher is there, the child learns something, somebody looks after the child every day, and the child makes some progress, whereas in the government school, in too many situations, the child learns nothing because the teacher isn't there, and after a while the parent gives up. So that's that point. And then the next point I want to make is about politics and government. Too often in the aid community, the whole debate is framed around technical assistance, as though politics is in some way negative or a dangerous thing. And of course, political interference or corruption in the political process is a bad thing. But in the end, as we see the spread of democracy, we need to get government leaders, politically elected leaders, leading these education reforms. We need to be in dialogue with them. They need to be the drivers of this, because politics needs to shift over time from politics about patronage, which is damaging, to politics about delivery and delivering results. If you ignore the politics altogether, you can't bring that transition about. The final point I want to make by way of introduction before I mention the Punjab system is however much you encourage the growth of the low-cost private sector, however much you see the whole system and think about how do I get every child a good education as soon as possible, you do need to reform the government systems. That is an important part of any whole system reform. Tackling corruption, holding people to account, making sure it's managed, using data, making sure the data applies to learning outcomes as well as to inputs. So all of that is an absolutely fundamental part of the agenda, because although in many big cities now the government sector is smaller than the low-cost private sector, it's still very large, and in most rural parts it's still by far the biggest single provider of education to poor people. Taking account of all of that, in Punjab we've had 5 elements of our reform. The first focuses on putting in place regular monthly data, building the data into the implementation, and that data is collected quickly, analysed within a week or two, and used to inform policy, so we get real-time data driving decision making. Secondly, we've reformed district management, so all the district leaders now are appointed on merit, on the basis of their track record, not on the basis of political interference. So we're moving, in that example, from political patronage to the politics of delivery. Thirdly, we have a strategy on teacher quality, new textbooks, new lesson plans, new models of teacher training that are close to the classroom and involve coaching and modelling good teaching, rather than taking people out of the classroom to go and be lectured elsewhere, away from the classroom. The fourth part of the reform is about the Punjab Education Foundation, which is independent of government, gets government money and donor money, and is buying places in the low-cost private sector of schools, either directly or through a voucher scheme, which gives vouchers only to poor families whose children are out of school. So we're using vouchers as a mechanism for getting the children of poor families into school. And then the final part of the programme is a series of crucial supporting programmes, of which the most important is a drive on enrolment. And the message on our enrolment drives is not please get your children into a government school, it's get your child into school. We don't mind what kind of school, make sure they're learning. And we're really working at the level of detail, getting teachers out into the streets and lanes of the villages, and helping the children and their families to enrol in school. We hope to make big progress with that in the next 3 months.